Hello, everybody. It is time for AJTV live. Hello. I'm Major Soccer, and today we're talking about the MOCS, the MOC Magic Online Championship, right? Because it's the Magic Online Championship Series, so it's not the MOCS. That's all the qualifiers. The MOCS Magic Online Championship Series Championship? I think it's just MOC. Anyway, the field this year was absolutely stacked, and the top four was, no surprise, also very stacked. And my favorite match from the weekend was the one we're going over today, which was the second semifinal match, and they played 3 best-of-3 matches, and this match went to all 9 games, which is kind of insane. We're going to really look closely at a couple of them and then run through the rest, because I don't have all night and neither do you. But first, let us look at the deck lists. This is, let's start with Marcio's deck. Mardu vehicles. What is there to be said? It is the bad guy. It is the deck of the format. Spoiler alert, it won the tournament. Second spoiler alert, it was not in the hands of Marcio Carvalho. But we see what makes this deck so strong. Of course, what is... oh, excuse me, echo. My own stream is open. How immature-ish of me. There we go. So, access to what has to be 3 of the top 3 cards, maybe 4 cards in the format. And a lot of the best enablers are also the best cards that also work well in the deck. So of course you're going to see it rise to the top. The 2 PNLR is kind of an interesting choice. After this tournament, we saw the move away from motorists and towards walking ballistas, but that is another topic for another time. What is really important about this list is this right here, Archangel Avacyn, a big role player in the matchup that we're going over today, and you will see why as we go. And we'll go over the sideboard kind of as the match progresses as well. But this is a deck that is pretty easy to evolve, so it's pretty important to stay up to date on. And it's this version is maybe a little outdated now, but the basic shell is there. And as we go over to boom, Lucas's deck. Oh, I should also say, bring his face back up. Marcio Carvalho is the runner-up of the last Pro Tour and the #1 ranked player in the world right now. So that's pretty cool. And then Lucas Blohon is a Pro Tour champion, who I think is in the top 25 still. But yeah, won a Pro Tour last year. I think he won Eldritch Moon, beating Owen Turdenwald in the finals. So, as far as play skill goes, this match was already set for greatness. But we see 4-color copycat, of course, Saheeli Felidar Guardian. What makes this deck different than, say, the Jeskai builds that we saw debuting at the Pro Tour, where they got absolutely smashed, is it's a much more mid-range, cohesive deck. It's not a dedicated control deck with a combo in it, and it's not a super hyper combo deck with some small elements of control. I mean, this is a solid mid-range deck. Rogue Refiner is a very solid mid-range card. Harness Lightning, one of the better removal spells in the format, especially with the energy sub-theme going on here. Along with that energy sub-theme, this Whirler Virtuoso is quite strong in a lot of matchups, including this one, although you're not really often trading very well with the tokens. It's more just potential gains of, 4 life at a time, which is often worthwhile, but not necessarily game winning. And then the 3 Chandra, 1 Tameo, more sort of mid-range control elements, and the Oaths, specifically good with the Guardian that you can blink, but also good with Planeswalkers. The mana is usually pretty good with Attunes and Servants, but if your Servants are dying, sometimes getting double red for Chandra can be difficult, or the white for Tameo. It also just helps you save energy because you don't have to use your Aether Hub to make the extra mana. You can just funnel it through the Oath of Nisa. And Oath of Chandra is a super potent tool, not only because it's a removal spell that can be blinked with the Guardian, but Oath into Chandra, the Chandra plussing and dealing 2, that's 4 damage, which just so happens to kill Gideon outright, which is one of the key cards in this matchup, and in the format in general, seeing as it's busted, and Mardu Vehicles utilizes it very, very well. And so, Kenny Wings in the chat says, IMO, it looks more Naya splashing blue than Jeskai splashing green. Yeah, you don't want to fall into the classic splashing my mana fixing, so you do have a very heavy green base. Even game trails, you see 7 plus the hub and sanctum that you're going to be playing anyway of these real these real green sources, and much less in terms of blue and red. It also has to do with your red being double red at Chandra and Harness Lightning being an important removal spell to have on 2. So red is really important. So now you're red-green, and then you're just kind of double splashing the white and blue somewhat. But yes, I would agree with that statement. To the match. As you can see, Reed Duke and Patrick Sullivan commentating. I want to say how awesome it was that they had the Skype commentary groups. I think that that's really, really awesome. Because you get talent that you wouldn't otherwise get, like Patrick Sullivan and Reed Duke, who don't live in Seattle, and it would be a hassle to fly them there. But instead, they can commentate from their own homes. So this is game 1. We're going to run through it pretty fast. Lucas Blohon having the play is quite good, but fearing missing this land drop is not so good. Considering not using the Harness Lightning on the Exemplar, but there aren't really many 2-drops that you'd want to hit anyway. Scrounger you don't want to hit, and Motorist is good enough to hit, but you can trade for that pretty efficiently with the Virtuoso. Does hit a land, but it's tapped. Thankfully, Lucas has access to another Harness Lightning if he wants to spend his mana again, which he does. I think this is a product of his hand being quite good and just wanting to keep his life total high and let the game progress. Marcio's hand is a little glutted, triple Gideon without the 4th land. We don't get to see how the scries went with either Motorist, but you have to assume that the first one was looking for a 3rd land and this one was looking for a 4th land. Virtuoso comes down. Lucas misses a land drop, but with a bunch of 3-drops which defend quite well, plenty of time. Didn't find that land, found a Thraben Inspector and cast that instead. Even missed off of 2 scries and a clue crack. Potentially 4 cards, assuming the scries were bottom 2 spells. Saheeli comes down, and you see these types of boards where now it's not really clear who is the beatdown and who is the control, right? That's why I named this episode Dynamic Roles, I think is what I called it. But the concept of who's the beatdown, if you're not familiar, is simply, one player is the beatdown and the other player is the control in any given situation. And a misidentification of your role is equivalent to losing the game. Things aren't so cut and dry, black and white in Standard or in Magic anymore these days. And it's a lot more about ever-shifting board states and being able to develop dynamic game plans within, unique situations. So there will be similar play patterns, but tactically, one slight difference can alter whether you think that, you can make that extra attack or whether you do have to hold back. And these types of games where, the Marcio's hand is quite powerful, but his board is about even. Lucas is tight on lands, but has this kind of mishmash of nonsense going on. It's not clear that one player is the beatdown and one player is the control, right? It's just both players are trying to do their own thing as best they can. The first Gideon instantly emblems, as Marcio has plenty of backups, and this greatly diminishes the power of the Thopters, both to attack the Gideon and on defense, giving your creatures more toughness. People in the chat talking about playing black in 4-color twin. I don't think that you need it in this deck, but you can definitely build a version of Saheeli Twin that plays black, probably instead of red, since the green tools are so strong. Especially if your 4 colors, having access to the green is really important. No 4th land to win instantly, but still plenty of action, plenty of stabilization. And you can see in these types of game states, or game types rather, the strength of the 4-color copycat deck to clog up the board. Right? This Heart of Kirin that was, drawn a little late would have been absolutely schooling this board. The Virtuosos can chump, but there's no Harness Lightnings, Chandra doesn't kill it, none of this Refiner nonsense blocks it, Saheeli doesn't do anything against it. There's a lot to be said for the keyword flying against Copycat, just because of how much they can clog up the ground and how poor they are in the air, and being able to get through in the air greatly diminishes the strength of the Planeswalkers, which is also important. So Lucas finds not quite a land in the form of a tune, but has a pretty natural play this turn of a tune into planes for Virtuoso. Start with a Saheeli cantripping off a Rogue Refiner, see if he could find an untapped white source and win on the spot. And just like that, of who's the beatdown and who's the control, we see Lucas doing a lot of attacking and more board development, while Marcio is more defensively stanced and trying to protect his planeswalker. The traditional aggro and control roles being reversed. Granted, this is a similar game type to that you'll see play out when motor vehicles can't go to the sky. You know, things change greatly on your timetable and your ability to form aggression when Heart of Kirin is on the board. Dude 4552 asks on the game podcast, Jerry said that him and Raptor thought that Virtuoso was the best card in the matchup. Would you agree? Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. Lucas actually boards one out, which I think is odd. I don't think I would do that. I don't know about best card in the matchup, but it's definitely very good. I definitely wouldn't board one out, but Lucas does, and I think part of that is just it doesn't actually fight the battles, right? It just buys you time. You're never going to trade Thopters for a heart. But being able to catch up and go wide, or make a bunch of chump blockers for both Heart and Gideon, I think are both really, really important aspects of the matchup. Post board when Mardu gets Chandras as well, just more planeswalkers to pressure. So Lucas could have just won on the spot there, but with mana open and way ahead on cards, way ahead on board, instead attunes for the planes, casts Chandra to take out the Heart, which was forced to block. And we can skip ahead now. Marcio taps out, and Lucas combos. So, let's actually watch the sideboarding. I was going to skip over it, but here. I don't know if Lucas boards out the Virtuoso every time or if it's a play draw thing. Play draw very important in sideboarding here, as you'll see. Let's watch Blohon's side first. Chandra's come out. That's like the worst card. Just does not match up well. Like, it's a bad removal spell for these 1 and 2 drops. Doesn't kill the Hearts or Gideons. It's actually pretty good against Gideon, but is really bad against both Unlicensed Disintegration and all of the flyers. Here we go. Unlicensed Disintegration and all of these flyers. These things and Hearts. And they're just expensive and slow. So they come out and Servant, I think, is the other thing that comes out. No, Oath. Alright, so he cut a Servant and brought it back in, but release the Gremlins in Natural State, obviously. Natural State just to not die to Hearts, I guess. But release the Gremlins is a huge counter punch in this matchup. It's like a split card where its 2 modes are 3 mana stabilize or 5 mana win the game. It pretty much feels like it. Looks like Lucas is kind of toying with the Servant, but release the Gremlins addresses a lot of the problems of Heart of Kirin being so good against the copycat deck, having to fight in the skies like that, and then especially if things like caravans and flagships are coming in as well, the release of the Gremlins just becomes off the rails absurd. Let's actually go back and watch how Marcio sideboarded. 2-2 suited. I was surprised Brawl's expertise doesn't come in for this matchup. No, Brawl's expertise is for green-black mostly. The difference being that Mardu's creatures cost 1 and 2 mana, and the green-black deck's creatures cost 2, 3, 4, and 5 mana. So yeah, we see Shocks come in, which is a real good upgrade over Fatal Push. Still takes out Servant, takes out the Refiners without needing Revolt. Marks up, keys up against the combo, and helps go after Planeswalkers directly, probably teaming up with Chandra's, which also come in because the 1-for-1 removal spell of the minus is so strong, and you gain that ability to keep going. Grinding style, becoming the control with your aggro deck. Pianalars come out. He shaves a Gideon, which I find interesting as well, which I guess is you're bringing in Caravan, which helps a little, but you're bringing in a bunch of 4 and 5 drops, and Gideon can actually be squared up by Oath of Chandra into Chandra pretty well, or Oath of Chandra into Saheeli even pressures it pretty hard. He doesn't know if the Chandra is coming out necessarily, although that is pretty standard practice. Marcio seems like he's a little too heavy here. But Ballista's great against the combo. Developmentally very good. Thalia great against the combo and matches up quite well against a lot of Lucas's removal. We can skip to the next game now. I had these timestamps written down somewhere, but... Oh, that's right. I remember watching this live. They had to redo sideboarding because they got bugged out. So it looks like... Looks like it is 1 Caravan, shaving 2 Gideons. It's kind of interesting. The upgrade of Fatal Push, Motorists, just too bad against the ground getting clogged up. You can still play Exemplars on the play, although I know a lot of Mardu players board them out on the draw. But you can see how much bigger this sideboard plan is. Yes, 2-2 Suited asks the right question. Who's the beatdown post board? Exactly. Exactly. It's really, really not clear. Release the Gremlins isn't an aggro card, but it turns the tables, right? It's a card that seizes initiative, as well as generate absurd amount of card advantage. And then the Mardu deck that's supposed to be the aggro deck is boarding out a bunch of its aggro cards for more 4 and 5 mana things. Which seems counterintuitive, right? If you're the beatdown, you should be trying to go low to the ground, but I say low to the ground in terms of cheap stuff. Your spell's not costing much, but it's also just low to the ground in that your stuff doesn't fly and thus gets outvalued by the creature base of the copycat deck. Oath of Chandra coming down on the Scrounger just buys so much time. You really are fine getting that value there. Your mana as Lucas, kind of awkward now against the Heretic. But Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Lucas led with Forest for the slate, and then had to go Mountain to play the Oath, and now can't play an untapped blue source for Virtuoso, which is a little unfortunate for him. But you want to harness Lightning the Thalia anyway, and you just pray that you don't get Gideoned on this turn. And we can actually speed up a little again. Would you say that Release the Gremlins is a key card for the deck to pivot from control to beatdown? Absolutely. I mean, it's still a controlling card, right? It's still card advantage, and you're stabilizing the board. It just makes it so that you can start attacking. It's like every time you cast Release the Gremlins for 2, you're going to be so far ahead on board that then your opponent is the one that's trying to draw the game out to sort of counteract the value of your Release the Gremlins. But Sky Sovereign comes down, and Natural Slate is not Release the Gremlins, and all of a sudden, what looked like a fairly stable board has become quite perilous thanks to the big boat. And Archangel basically seals it up. All Marcio has to do from here is not get comboed. Basically, straight up, like, the game is very much in his hands, and so he doesn't want to invest mana in either Sorcery Speed Avacyn or activating Shambling Vent to crew the Sky Sovereign because he could potentially die. And it just so happens, with Veladar Guardian off the top, had Marcio Carvalho been, a little more aggressive and tried to get in there with the big boat this turn, he would have died. Just would have lost on the spot. So again, your aggro deck is actively choosing not to attack, kill a creature, and deal 6 damage. No thank you. I'm going to hold up my removal spell. Bonkers. Lucas has to go for it, and it obviously doesn't work out with Unlicensed Disintegration, but there's really no choice. You can't continue this game passively as Lucas, and you'll just die to the boat. So your options are go for it or wait and draw exactly Release the Gremlins and have your opponent not have Avacyn, because he would still die to the Avacyn if he just waited. If he doesn't combo there, then Avacyn is already down, and that's a 2-turn clock straight up that you have no answer to, no removal for. You have to go for the combo the turn after, which if they have a removal spell, then he's going to break it up anyway, and you're giving them an extra card in the meantime. So, even though Lucas knew he was probably 10% for that to have worked and gone through, you still have to go for it, because 10% is more than 0%, and that is math. Not sure what's happening here. So they did draw Release the Gremlins, but sadly too little too late. But look at this. As illustrated, even though he's so far behind, he's still going to just die to the Archangel Avacyn. The Release the Gremlins gets the Rogue Refiner in there. That's not nothing, right? But too much pressure still. Avacyn too strong. Flying is broken. Ban flying. Etc. Attune into Virtuoso. Maybe I have some chump blocks now. Except, shock my own thing, flip Avacyn, you're dead. And now, we go to sideboarding again, and we immediately see Marcio Carvalho going on the draw and cutting the Exemplars. Going on the play, Lucas also, see, he does cut a Virtuoso. It's very odd. But, in addition to, the Chandras out for the Release the Gremlins, he boards in Negates and a Tracker for Saheeli, Servant, and Virtuoso. Now, Servant is because it doesn't really do much. You can't really cut a land because you need to be able to cast your spells, but it's a non-card. It's just another mana source, and it's pretty important that all your cards do something because you're fairly prone to flooding out, and that is one of the key ways that you lose long games, which is also addressed by the addition of the Tracker. Saheeli comes out because the Mardu deck has enough ways to break up the combo that you can't just jam it whenever, and Saheeli's pretty poor on her own. She really needs her cat pet, whereas the Guardian can act pretty decently without Saheeli's help. But the Whirler Virtuoso cut is interesting. But we do see those play-draw differences. The Negates coming in for Lucas are addressing the going bigger sideboard plan of the boats. And the fact that you are on the play means you'll have more mana available to you by the time the Planeswalkers start coming down. It means that the opponent's very likely to be boarding out the Exemplars, which means that you're going to have more time, and the game's going to go longer. So things like Negate for things like Gideon are going to matter a higher percentage of the time. And here we see a pretty solid draw from Marcio Carvalho. Inspector into Fatal Push, drop a mana is not great. And then Scrounger, not be able to attack, drop a mana is not great. And 3 lands in hand is not great. So it's actually not that good of a draw. But a clue in play, an unlicensed disintegration, and Lucas hasn't really developed too well thus far. Like his Aslan avatar. I believe that is Jareth. And an aggressive attack. How? How do you make that attack, right? Because this is gonna come back for free theoretically, but there's nothing there yet. You can buy a lot of time with it by blocking here, or this is a free block. But, oh yeah, I bet it's just a Johnny. He's got the little demarcations around his eyes. But again, from Lucas's side, my hand is good. I have initiative. I have removal for developmental stuff, and I have negate for any powerful stuff. It is a key aspect of the matchup to be able to identify these spots where, hey, if I start racing right now, I actually not only win the race, but win the game earlier than I would otherwise. And you would think that being flooded, big boat would be a great draw here. Obviously, Lucas has it covered with the negate. Also, randomly has built up a ton of energy throughout the game, so this Virtuoso is going to go ham. More motorists, again, an awkward draw. I mean, you only have so many cards to make it up to your 60, but they're just so poor and so low impact. Obviously, they're better than exemplars from the draw, thanks to the scribe, but they really just match up poorly against such a huge percentage of Lucas's deck. Trying to buy the Aslan Planeswalker. Fresh out, sorry. Ride me. Oath of Chandra, because why not? Guardian, Oath of Chandra, because why not? Present lethal. The disintegration has to be used, although it was going to be used anyway. 4 Thopters. Nothing can happen here. They know each other's deck lists, but there are Mardu decks that have Fumigate, so if they didn't have deck lists, I'm sure Lucas would have played that a little more conservatively, but he didn't have to, because he knows. Hello, Mark Rosewater. Welcome people joining from New Mods Thing. We're going over some MOCS matches, or games from one match. And I lost my timestamps, so I'm just scrubbing through this video to find the games. There we go. Mulligan for Carvalho, who I believe has the play now. What was my favorite deck from the championship? I mean, there were only really the 2 decks. Like, the green-black decks were poor, and the Marvel deck was terrible. So, I mean, I would say Raptors, but I think his deck was kind of misbuilt. So I guess my answer would just be Lucas's, honestly. The mana for Carvalho, a little awkward there. Having to go tap land into Motorist into Pianolar while this Exemplar just rots in his hand. Rogue Refiner letting Lucas develop quite well. Heart of Kirin and Exemplar both late to the party. And here we have a pretty awesome decision point. And I can actually fast forward because I remember this took Lucas like a full minute. But this is a good opportunity for a you make the play. The video was paused. You make the play. You've not made your 4th land drop. You're about to play an Aether Hub or a Forest. And you don't know your opponent's card is Avacyn, obviously. Now, at the time, Patrick Sullivan was saying that the game's going to go long enough that you could use both Chandras to good effect. Reed said, I'm not sure that the game is necessarily going to go that long, and your other Chandra can be used to good effect even if you use the first one now. Saheeli doesn't really do anything on this board. You would have to just like minus it right away, probably. maybe getting a scry and gain 4 life is better than drawing a card. Patrick suggests just playing Servant and passing. And I think that it's really, really close. My candidate play was to run out Chandra and kill probably Exemplar, because it's just too good at crewing the heart. And Pianalar, not as threatening. Either of those creatures trades with your Refiner, and if you're minusing Chandra, then the Thopter's going to kill it either way. But what Lucas did, and which I actually like a lot after I saw him do it, is Chandra minus, but not on Exemplar or Pianalar, but rather on the Thopter. Now, you force either the heart to go after it if they don't have another thing to crew, or some sort of double attack where they have to trade one off. And there you go. It works out famously. Now, it's not high percentage that it works out like that, but the fact that it could, it's very possible that it works out like that. You end up with a much better game state where you've gained a bunch more life and dealt with that pesky flyer, which then also gives your other future planeswalkers more value now that that nuisance is out of the way. And again, we see Rogue Refiner attacking. Servant gives you plenty of blockers, and the damage really adds up. 3 planeswalkers in hand, all of which can do damage on their own, plus there's an Oath of Chandra in play. 3 damage from a Rogue Refiner is not nothing. It's not negligible. To the point where Heart of Kiran stays back on defense. Carvalho has an Exemplar that is terrible on defense and could be used to crew the heart. But even that is not enough to pull the trigger. Who is the Beatdown? Right? This aggro deck just passed up 4 damage. Where's my pen? Passed up what is essentially 4 damage because the Exemplar can't block. I mean, these two have to crew the heart together to block. But just look at the life totals. You knock Lucas to 15, and they get to attack back with all this nonsense. Plus, they have a ton of mana to do whatever they want, whatever he wants on his own turn. After that, it's just a losing proposition. Meanwhile, your hand is super good. Normally, you don't want to activate your heart on defense because then you expose yourself to things like Chandra and Oath of Chandra, the sorcery speed removal. If you use it only for offense, then Harness Lightning is the only thing that takes it down. But when you have a redundant copy, it's okay if you eat a creature and get Oath of Chandra, because you just turn on your other heart. And then your hand is Unlicensed Disintegration, Archangel of Avacyn, and you have Needle Spires. So you have actually a pretty decent long game, right? You're the aggro deck that is in a position where not only are you losing this race, but also your hand indicates that if the game goes longer, you are likely favored. Obviously, there's always the chance of being comboed out, although hopefully Disintegration can help against that. But we see that role reversal yet again. What Carvalho doesn't know is that there's actually just so much fire in Lucas's hands that he's not going to survive to deploy all of it. But the principle holds the same. Tamio comes down. Immediately minuses, I think, on the, yeah, being a Lar in the heart of Kieran. That's kind of the worst of both worlds for Marcio, thanks to, not getting, like, taking a ton of damage this turn and not getting value out of the heart in your hand. The aggro Tamio, never expected. But priced into using unlicensed disintegration and taking out the Tamio, but still takes 4 plus 2. 2, 2, 2. Down to 9. Now, Gideon's a good draw in a normal game type where, this board is getting bogged down and your hand is super strong, as Carvalho. But again, Lucas was very cognizant of how much direct damage he had access to and how much damage he could get through by, attacking with the Refiner early and then developing the Servants instead of trying to Sahili and Scry and stay back on defense. This plan was set up from a very early turn and calculated out, which actually the broadcasters are talking about different Chandra lines where, you take out the Knight and then attack Gideon, or do you attack Gideon first and then these 2 blocks happen, which you're happy about, and then the Chandra plus and the Oath take out the Gideon. All very good lines to discuss, but Lucas found a better one, which is take out the 2-2 and faces the place. Again, rather than completely blow apart Marcio's board, get the card advantage and the developmental advantage of taking out the Gideon for free. No thank you. Aggro deck. I will kill you instead. And Carvalho knows, save 2 damage here because the rest of the damage that he's going to face this game is, not going to be as chumpable. And a pretty unfortunate run out for Carvalho, who was in a decent spot. He was going to get burned out either way, I'm pretty sure, but 4 lands and a heart in play, and your draw is second heart, Avacyn, Gideon, which was good, but then another Avacyn. Not ideal. Especially considering this is game 1, so you don't even have your boats in yet. Those are the only 2 5s in your deck. Take out Chandra. Maybe you have absolutely nothing. The old desperation attack does not work. Instead, it's Sahili Rai, copy servant, Sahili Rai, copy servant, Chandra trigger, etc. Death to Carvalho. I like that he went back and reset the blocks on the real ones rather than the copies. So we see the sideboards actually change a little bit here. One negate coming in on the draw this time, now that he knows that the boats are indeed coming in. And an Oath of Nissa comes out, which I suppose is a sacrifice to the fact that you are cutting, 3 cards that can be hit with Oath in Chandra's, and boarding in 4 cards, that are misses in the 3 release the gremlins and the negate. So you just have a bunch more misses with the Oath. So it's lower impact. Also, you no longer need it to help you with this double red. So, it makes sense to shave an Oath here. And you can see these cards that he's eyeing are the play-draw differences as well. More awkward comes into play tapped lands. Enters the battlefield tapped lands. But Heart of Kirin with a crew from the play. Lucas having an Oath here and not getting to hold up Harness Lightning. Obviously thought that developing the Virtuoso next turn was more important. Or the release. So has to take a big chunk there, and then does Manic Vandal, which looks pretty good, right? That's a fairly stable board. Block the 3-2 rather than the 3-1 because of your Felidar Guardians and Thopters. And Ballista for 1. And here we see the power of the Ballista for 1. Not only does it mark up against the combo, but it's just very good against the types of stabilization that Blohon has access to in the form of Thopters and Planeswalkers. Obviously the Chandras aren't in the deck anymore, but Tamiyo and sometimes Saheeli can be a hassle, and having that direct damage is nice. Having the direct damage for when your 3-power creature runs into the 1/4 Felidar Guardian, super strong. And being able to keep Thopters off of the back of your 3-1, very strong. So even though it seems a little underwhelming, quite powerful still. I'm not sure how I feel about it now, but watching live, I remember wishing that instead of the Ballista this turn, it was just Inspector, and then you play Ballista for 2 next turn. But I think both sides of that have their upsides and downsides. And now Lucas is looking to, can I play in a way where if I don't draw a land, I'm okay? Or do I have to play in a way that assumes that my next card is a land? And I say that because this release, the Gremlins, on these two, or, you know, the Ballista and a boat. I'll draw a boat for you so you know what it looks like. That's a boat. Well, waves, even though it's a sky boat. Having access to release the Gremlins for 2 on 5, probably going to be important. Goes with the Virtuoso, which gives him some good blocks. And now we see part of the drawback of not being able to play Ballista for 2. This attack, if this block were met with, you know, a ping, then that's pretty good. But now he would have to use his whole turn, which Lucas would be totally okay with, or let the Ballista die, which Lucas would be totally okay with, or let the 1/1 trade for the 3/1, which Lucas would totally be okay with. So I much prefer the Ballista coming out for 2, because each ping is so valuable, and a Ballista in your hand, each ping costs 2 mana, whereas on board each ping costs 4 mana. I will not make the boat noise. You can imagine it in your head. Make the boat noise yourselves at home. The Virtuoso does not jump in front of the Scrap Heap Scrounger. Which is a bit interesting. But, more importantly, the 5th land does come off the top. Now, part of the reason that that block might not have happened is because Scrounger going to the yard means that 2 of this mana gets used up. So if Marcio has 2 1-drops or a 2-drop, he can use his mana super efficiently. Whereas if he doesn't block, then it's possible that the mana gets awkward. It just so happens that it was 1-drop with clue, so it didn't matter either way for mana efficiency purposes. But could be one of the reasons it played out like that. 5th land, release the Gremlins. This is a really important interaction to know. Release the Gremlins, and the casters pointed this out. Release the Gremlins doesn't say destroy X artifacts, create an artifact for each one destroyed this way. A lot of older cards are templated that way. Maybe even newer ones, I'm not sure. But that's a very normal templating for cards like this. That is not what Release the Gremlin says. It says destroy X target artifacts, create X 2/2 Gremlins. So, what determines how many Gremlins you get is X, not how many things actually die to it. So as long as the Release the Gremlins resolves, you're good. If it fizzles, you're not good. But the Ballista getting a ping off and not being there anymore, not enough to rob Lucas of a Gremlin. The Scrounger's still there, so there's still a target, so release still resolves, and part of the resolution is getting 2 Gremlins. Runst. That is a poor boat noise. F-. Get back the Scrounger. Draw a brick and crack a clue, I believe is what happens. And draw another brick. You have to take some pretty unfavorable trades against some Gremlins here, but the Scrounger gets to come back. Another Release the Gremlins. This Release the Gremlins is just protection against boat and heart, and I guess caravan. And I think that this is a pretty key point to look at. Veladar Guardian blinks Whirler Virtuoso. Now, first of all, he missed 2 damage. Right? That's just free. Like, if they chump and try and shock it, I don't know. Some weird stuff would have to happen. You definitely just attack. But also, what's this guy doing down here? This is like the default choice, I would say, is the Oath. So going for the extra Thopter here is a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Purposeful decision, right? That if a player is playing on autopilot, Oath of Nissa gets blinked here. But there's a couple things going on. One, Thopter is good against flyers. Hooray. 2, if this Harness Lightning is on Avacyn duty, you're going to need another energy. 3, Oath can let Hub cast Tamiyo, but with no energy, this thing can't ever be cast. So the idea is blink this, you turn on the other cat, which then can blink the Oath. And you also turn on the Harness Lightning. but I still think he missed 2 damage. Scrounger comes back. Unlicensed Disintegration, not the worst draw. And now it's kind of decision time of, do you take out the cat and attack with Scrounger, or do you settle in and wait? And I like taking it out because it's possible that even if you try and wait and to break up the combo, Lucas just has a negate, right? Plus, it doesn't get any better for you here. Getting this damage across either this really good trade-off or the damage across, plus the 3 from Disintegration without any shenanigans happening, all really, really important. And Lucas actually blocks and doesn't make a Thopter. That's how important his dedication to the extra energy for Harness Lightning and the energy for Hub to cast Cat. That is some discipline, some dedication. Unfortunately, he draws a Tune with Aether and gets absolutely punished because not only does he have planes for his Felidar Guardian now, but he also has plenty of energy for things like Harness Lightning. Now this Guardian comes down and is priced into blinking the hub because Harness Lightning has to play some defense because of the Shambling Vent attack. This is the only way that you can stay above 3 against Harness Lightning. Or against the other one, Unlicensed Disintegration. Question is that worth it? Because again, we could have seen Blink Oath and take some extra damage. The question you have to ask yourself here is, can I beat Unlicensed Disintegration anyway? And I think the answer is no. I think if another Unlicensed Disintegration comes off the top, you lose as Lucas. And once you decide that that is the case, you become much more inclined to bounce your Oath, because now you need to combo to win, and you don't have to keep your life total above 3. And I think that that was a decision that was not made. A consideration that was not made. Archangel Avacyn off of a Clue is really bad for Lucas. Just so happens this number matches this one. And Release the Gremlins does not do anything against it, nor does Tamiyo. Basically 2-outered, although it's very, very likely that Unlicensed Disintegration would have gotten the job done as well. I think that there was a world where Tamiyo did a different mode here. I think that the release on this thing to get another 2-2 could have happened. Obviously, you're giving up a lot of equity when you have Release the Gremlins in hand. You have Boat and Heart squared up. But no dice. Honestly, I think all those decisions were probably correct, and Lucas got unfortunate and flooded a little. I think the decisions... and I actually like blinking Whirler Virtuoso. And I like the block, and I like the not making a token. But I think the second Felidar Guardian needed to blink Oath. And then I think maybe a Tamiyo could have drawn a card off of the Guardian. A lot of maybes throughout that. The key point from this game is really on that key turn, on those key turns, you have to ask yourself, is Licensed Disintegration going to beat me no matter what? Or can I beat Unlicensed Disintegration as long as I don't die to it? I think it was game over anyway. But Avison, great peel after Lucas flooded. A GG. And we see this re-sideboarding from Lucas with a Virtuoso. Oh, excuse me. Alright. Type in the chat if you yawned. And be honest. Saheeli comes out. A Virtuoso comes out. Tracker and the second negate come in. And Marcio Carvalho goes with the Exemplars out. Penalars back in. He's got a boat. Just one boat, not two boats. No caravans this time either, that's different. More motorists to fill out the deck, I suppose. Ooh, Elijah, gotcha. Rock Bogglesworth didn't yawn when I yawned, but yawns when I said the word yawn. Don't know what that says about you. You know, yawning's supposed to be like an empathetic thing. Mulligan on the draw for Carvalho, but his hand is totally fine. Piece of disruption, something late, a heart, and a way to crew it. Can't ask for too much more. Lucas's hand, some mana and some spells. Game! Snap keep, can't possibly lose. Or something like that. Spoiler alert. He loses. Spire Bluff, a fine draw, frees up the Servant. Couple of lands. Carvalho wanted to get up to 4 for the Gideon, but has no use for that 5th mana yet. But this curve is still pretty straightforward. This is a great play. I thought this was one of the quiet, best plays of the tournament. No attack. Excuse me, no attack. No crew and attack. Can't use this Harness Lightning. Well, this mana either goes to waste, or you have to use what is a pretty much premium removal spell on a Scrounger, which theoretically comes back eventually. I dig it. Mana efficiency, or forced mana inefficiency, I suppose I should say. Lucas does do the Harness Lightning on the Scrounger, probably while grimacing. Gideon does get negated. Normally you would think the second Gideon wouldn't be a good draw, but the first one running into negate means the second one is pretty ideal. Lucas continuing to flood out, nothing to do with his Guardian, so he didn't even play it last turn. No answer for the Gideon in this game where the board is sort of slowing down, stabilizing. Again, no Blast of Heart into the red zone off of the Gideon loyalty, protecting maybe protecting Gideon's loyalty, but mostly protecting Heart from a Harness Lightning, which Lucas does have. Oath of Chandra off the top takes out the 2/2, but Servant can't attack because the Heart can block, and no second red mana means Harness Lightning can't take it down. Rob Bogglesworth asks if the players run streaming software themselves. I believe that they just are in observer mode. Another lands for Lucas. Remember what I was saying about how one of the main ways that the copycat deck loses, especially post-board, is flooding? Well, we're seeing it here, and it's part of the reason why he boards out that Servant, and part of the reason why the Oath can come out, the Oath of Nissa. This deck does not need this much mana, and it doesn't have things like Glimmer of Genius or Torrential Gearhulk to really take advantage of it. So when you are on less spells, you know, this is 6 spells, these do not match up well against Creature who comes back, awesome Planeswalker, and the game matches up well against that, but not the second copy. Heart of Kirin, you don't have your Release the Gremlins or anything like that. Archangel Avacyn, you know, you have your Harness Lightning, but how are you dealing with the rest of this stuff? Pound for pound. Again, this all comes back to dynamic rolls. Pound for pound, the card quality on the side of the, quote, aggro deck is way higher, right? Couple of Mopey removal spells, a 1/4 vanilla, a Grizzly Bear vanilla, and a negate, versus 2 Gideons, a Heart, an Avacyn, even has creature lands, has a shock in hand. On card quality, just completely outclassed by the more aggressive archetype. Virtuoso gives a little value here. The 3 energy that's been lingering from Hub and the first Harness Lightning, matched with the Virtuoso itself, plus the Guardian Blink. You got a lot of chumpers. And this is what we were talking about in sideboarding, where, you know, the Virtuoso is good, but in these types of games... Oh, he actually blinks the Oath of Chandra and goes after this? That's interesting. I actually hate that. I disagree with that by a lot. I guess there's another Scrounger here, so remove the Avacyn, you have 2 Scroungers, but you're still just making the 2 Virtuoso tokens, blocking, chumping. You can block the other Scrounger in trade. Shambling Vent kind of messes that up. It gets a little murky there. I think I would have preferred a Thopter, but it's close. And boat off the top. I mean, this is already way in Marcio Carvalho's favor, and boat off the top is just like slamming the door. Obviously, Release the Gremlins will be sweet here. Ping, ping, ping. Release for 3 against a boat, a ship, and a Scrounger. Be pretty sweet. But yeah, boat off the top kind of seals the deal. But I liked Carvalho saving shock that game. If we go back a bit, there was definitely a turn where, you know, this shock could be used on this servant and whatever, but I don't know if it actually does anything. But the idea that, like, I am just so far ahead, I'm going to keep my removal spell in hand to not get comboed, because, you know, there's a lot of mana over here and a lot of cards that Lucas isn't using, one of which has to be Cat, because this is the first time that there's something to Cat. It's just another example of the, you know, relationship dynamics between these decks are not as clear-cut as one player being the beatdown and one player being the control. Hello, Chris Cox. Hello, Reed and Patrick. Scrub, scrub, scrub. Brewdog34 asks, what do you think about Lucas keeping in 3 Saheelias as opposed to 1 or 0? I don't think you want 0, and I don't think you want 4. How's that? I would err around 2 to 3 rather than 1. Just because I think that your late game is not as good as being demonstrated by this video, you know, these matches. Your late game is not as good as theirs. It's not as much better than theirs as you would think, at the very least. Yeah, so at a certain point, you do have to kill the opponent. Now, yeah, what Scooter said is very true. It depends on what your opponent is doing. It is also very possible that your opponent doesn't have any of this bigger stuff, just boards in a couple of shocks, and tries to stay aggro, in which case you're good to go. But if your opponent has boats and Chandras, I think it's pretty important to have access to the combo post board. Oath into Servant, into Turbo Cat for Oath again. Both players with great draws this game. Turn 1 Exemplar, turn 2 Heart. And it's over. So again, we see the, quote, control deck killing on turn 4. Whoops. And that's not to say Marcio did anything wrong or could have done anything differently. That's the advantage you get for playing the Saheeli deck. Whereas the inherent cost of playing the Saheeli deck is that sometimes you draw, Cat or Saheeli, and it's embarrassing. But that free win aspect, not for nothing, but that free win's pretty good. Seems like we're playing from both sides. Let's skip to the game. Oh, they're starting already. And I think this is... I guess match 2, game 2 was my favorite game of the series. But, this one's pretty sweet, too. Or maybe it's the next one. Whatever. Oath of Chandra, Scrounger. After Exemplar into Scrounger, Scrounger again. Hit for 3 twice. Virtuoso comes down to try and stem the bleeding. And Carvalho's just firing on all cylinders. With a tune, it's tempting to not trade off your Virtuoso here. Also, I guess Guardian. But, you're already down to 8, and they haven't used their mana this turn. And Thalia, pretty solid against Virtuoso. And this turn is really, really clutch. Now, killing Thalia is on the docket, right? Pause. Let me go back. So you draw for turn, you haven't played your land yet. Killing Thalia is super important. Both because it's another creature, and also because this hand is looking, looking to combo, and very likely looking to combo soon. Now there's a couple of ways to accomplish that. You could just Oath of Chandra, you could Guardian the Oath, or you could just Guardian the Virtuoso and set up to Oath the Thalia and play Saheeli Rai in the same turn, thus preventing the other copy of Thalia coming down. Now, since it's only a 2-of post board, I don't think that you can necessarily make, a huge adjustment of your game plan to try and box out the legend rule, but it is a consideration. The other consideration being, of course, that in order to play Guardian this turn, you have to play Forest. Why does that matter? Because your 5th land is Game Trail. So this is a very much a spot where Lucas has to say, am I going to try and combo next turn or the turn after, basically. Or at least, you know, leave one of those doors more open than the other. Goes with the Guardian, kill the Thalia. Disintegration off the top. Had no disruption before. Peels a good one there. Can he afford to hold it? Attack comes in, no energy left. Needle Spire is also active and not being activated. So Lucas knows there's at least one spell in hand. And we have another one of these really interesting combats. And sure enough, it is time for the Virtuoso to trade off. And Scrounger has to come back now. Spire of Industry is the only black source on Carvalho's side. Had that disintegration not come off the top, Lucas could have just won here. But it's also not clear that he would have just gone for it. Again, the question you have to ask yourself in Lucas's spot is, does this get better for me? And I think the answer to that is probably no. So probably I would have gone for it here. But there's also lines where you're trying to manipulate your opponent's access to black mana using Oath of Chandra. Because of that restriction, which is why we saw the Scrounger come back first, why we see a black floating here. And of course you're not going to let the black go to waste. You have to bring back your Scrounger. You need artifacts both to have a board presence and for your spires. And so we have this cool thing, this cool situation where if that game trail was just a normal land, the game would be over. Do you see how this weird interaction worked? The black mana is floated off of the Spire in main phase of Lucas. Lucas tries to pass into combat, and since there isn't a stupid combat rule in Magic Online, the Scrounger is returned with the black mana. And could win. Yes, people in the chat pointing out that the mana doesn't work with no energy, but if this came into play untapped, I mean, you just do this, right? Unlicensed hits Guardian, we move on. Incorrect. There's no mana. Right? Look, the Scrounger's coming back. There's no mana to cast Disintegration. We are still in Lucas's main phase. If the sequencing of lands had been different, like the Thalia that seemed like it didn't have much impact on the game because it just got killed right away, and 4 value, completely changes the way that Lucas had to play out his lands. In order to play Guardian on 4, it had to be Forest, not Game Trail, which means that the Forest was in play, so it couldn't be revealed to the Game Trail. Exactly. It's a big game of chicken. But it's not even. Normally it would be a game of chicken, but it's not even a game of chicken this time because Marcio has no choice. Marcio has to get back his Scrounger because access to no black mana means your Scroungers are never coming back. Your unlicensed disintegration is just off next turn. So there's really no choice for Carvalho. It just so happens that his Thalia messed up Lucas just enough that he couldn't pull it out here. And so the game continues with Scrounger in play. Attune for Forest to reveal to the game trail, play Servant. And Avacyn off the top, a great draw. Brewdog says maybe if he tapped his forest instead of the island for Oath, Carvalho might have unlicensed. I don't think so. I think that it's absolutely necessary. Oh, I should pause it again. I think it's absolutely necessary to get back Scrounger there. I don't think Marcio has a choice. So another interesting decision here. Where's my pen? There we go. Avacyn off the top. Right? Marcio could now pass the turn, end step the Avacyn, continue playing a normal game. Instead, chooses the much more aggressive line of unlicensed disintegration to Felidar Guardian. Knocks Lucas to 2, so these two attacking must be blocked, which obviously happens. But the Guardian that you are holding up the disintegration for is off the board. So what are the pluses and minuses? Well, it's possible that you just get stabilized on because you didn't play Avacyn. It's also possible you just get comboed, right? If this card or the draw are just cat, you just die. But what do you gain? The extra damage. You make sure that your Scrounger is there for the kicked disintegration. You force the Servant to be blocked. So actually, these three cards, since the Servant has to block, all three of these cards would have to be untapped land, Cat, Saheeli. So you're narrowing what you could die to immediately. But this is an unknown card that could very, very easily be Saheeli Rai the way the game played out. And the Forest was gotten off of Attune. So it would have to be a cat off the top, which there's 3 left in the deck since there's 1 in play. Yeah, exactly, Bogglesworth. But, that's not nothing. You could just die that way. Lucas did it to Raptor in the finals. Super, super interesting. I liked a lot of, throughout the whole tournament, Carvalho did a lot of really good, this time I sorcery speed it, and this time I instant speed it, etc. And as you'll see, spoilers upcoming, the way in which you time those spells can matter a lot, especially post-board. So here we see another kind of interesting decision, right? Saheeli could blink Virtuoso to get another Thopter, which is good because getting up to 9 energy and 3 birds means that you don't necessarily have to trade this off for the Spires if that gets activated. You can chump with one of the birds and then double the Exemplar. I guess there's no artifact, so that doesn't make sense. Never mind what I just said. But it's a decision of basically, the damage doesn't really matter. I mean, you have Oath of Chandra, so you're doing 2 more, so you're doing 3, so you're dropping him a little less. But, you know, you're not going to win by damage right now. It's a Scry versus a Thopter, which I think is pretty close. Actually, you get 2 damage with this attack anyway, so it's not even damage. It's just a Scry versus a Thopter, which I think is close, and I would err on the side of a Thopter, but that's because I'm a scaredy cat. Lucas instead goes for the Scry. And we have another fairly interesting decision. From Marcio's side once we get there. Bugglesworth asks, on the previous turn, did he need to main phase Disintegration because of black mana requirements? No, because he's traded the Scrounger off after. So the alternative to Disintegration attack is just pass. So you still have your artifact. Ping Pang. Pioneer. And Boat. So again, you have access to Avacyn, which from no cards you could attack with the 1/1, and if he blocks you just win. So he has to take 1 down to 1, which is cute, but doesn't really do anything. But you give him an opportunity to mess up. And then end step the Avacyn. Or Boat, take out the Virtuoso and pump your Exemplar so that you get to attack this turn. So you take out the Thopter, which you would think the default play would be make 2 Thopters and double block, but Lucas only makes 1 Thopter in order to keep white mana available to him off of the Aether Hub, which again is another reason why maybe the Saheeli should have downed instead of upped. But if Saheeli downs, then the Skyship Sovereign play turns different, so very, very interesting endgame from both sides. Lethal Attack must be chumped, and a 3-outer for the win with some redraws. Hits a land. And that's the ball game. Super, super interesting endgame. Where again, arguably the cards on the vehicle side were more powerful throughout that whole thing. I should mention playing the Boat there with all the advantages. The disadvantage that I forgot to mention was, you know, Release the Gremlins might be a card that Lucas could draw there, but overall I liked the way that it played out. And finally, Game 9. How often do you get to say that? Game 9. Similar, if not the same, boarding. Looks like the motorists are out. Third Gideon back in. Lucas's side is... A second servant came out. What came in? A second tracker. Second servant for second tracker. So again, just really sick of flooding out. Flooding out is very much a normal game type for this copycat deck because it doesn't have that raw card drawing. So going to So boarding out essentially a mana source in Servant for an anti-prevention tool in Tracker makes a lot of sense. Charlemagne MTG asks, do you like Raptor's list, or is it wrong to play despite him winning? I'm not a huge fan of his list. I think it has some flaws in it, but it's still very good. I mean, and it's also one of those decks that evolves week to week. So even if his deck was perfect, that doesn't mean that you should play that 75 the next week, right? Because things change. Game 9. Lucas on the play with a great hand. Marcio on the draw with a hand that makes a lot of sense considering his sideboard plan. He's got some Inspectors up to Avacyn, a Shock to not get comboed, and Peel's Heart. Doesn't quite have a crew yet, but a good way to fill out this curve without having to just spend your second turn cracking a clue. But that Heart matches up pretty well against Lucas's hand as it stands. No energy to boost the Harness Lightning, which also can't be cast because of no access to red mana. The Saheeli could be cast off of the Oath of Nissa, but Rogue Refiner, much better, especially against the board of 2/1/2s. And we see the Heart instead of Shock on Refiner attack for 2, much more important to develop. You can't be comboed yet, whereas later you're going to have to hold up mana to prevent being comboed. So it's really, really important to do it this way. Like the Oath, you have the energy to turn on your Harness Lightning. You just need to find red. So looking at the top 3 is better than just drawing 1 but getting 2 energy, which is exactly the exchange that he's making there with that decision. And again, we're seeing the quote control player with, kind of trying to push his board presence and develop on the table, and the other player having the better late game in Avacyn and getting Heart active and 2 clues in play and 2 removal spells, spending 1 on the Guardian. But things change back now because, again, it's dynamic. It's fluid. Even if you are the beatdown at one point, doesn't mean that you will be the beatdown 1 turn from now. The removal spell got used on the Guardian, so no longer am I pushing to combo you out. And so I settle in with my Tracker land drop clue, and now my hand is a bunch of removal spells and counter magic. As Lucas, I have reclaimed the seat of control. I think that this is a really interesting decision. Lucas actually does nothing here on the end step. If you crack the clue, your Tracker can be vulnerable to a Shock. And with Negate in your hand, and clearly Marcio doesn't have a Boat or Gideon here, or Chandra for that matter, because all of those would come down, especially against the Tracker. So you don't have to, demarcate your Negate off for one of those super powerful spells. So you can actually use it to protect your Tracker, which means that you can choose not to crack your clue. While I liked that play of not cracking the clue and holding the Negate to keep the Tracker, I do not like this play of cracking the clue on your turn. I understand that making this land drop is huge, huge upside. The problem is you are now setting yourself up for the 1-2 punch of Avacyn into something. If Avacyn comes down, you're pretty much priced into harnessing it, which means you lose access to Negate. Now, what you could think is, even if I brick and they play Avacyn, I can just not Harness Lightning it, which I think is legitimate, but I don't think that changes the fact that you'd rather just have the 4 mana. Then if that it doesn't happen, then you crack the clue on end step. Like, I understand getting the tracker rolling is important, but this sequence of plays seems like you take some unnecessary damage against exactly it. So Chandra comes off the top, which is a good one, and one that Lucas probably wouldn't be expecting, but the way that Lucas lined this up, I think that he's just happy taking 4 here. Well, not happy. Obviously, he would have preferred to make that land drop, but willing to take 4 here to leave up the negate, especially now that the tracker is out of shock range. It would have to be Disintegration, and you can't cast Disintegration and Chandra, for example. Brewdog asks, what do you think about Marcio not shocking in response to cracking the clue and went for Avacyn instead? I think it's too mana efficient. Like, I'm getting ahead of myself. I should have paused it. I think it's too effective to get Avacyn out there. Especially after Lucas didn't crack a clue. I can turn my face on for this. Especially after Lucas chose not to crack the clue. His negate's face up. Like, Marcio just knows he has a negate in hand. So, if you shock, what are you doing? You're setting your turn up for, like, shock and crack 2 clues, I guess? And then your hand is Avacyn, land, 3 random cards. The problem with that is then you're pretty glutted, right? Because you have to dedicate a whole turn to the Avacyn, whereas if you have shock and clues, then whatever you draw, you can kind of fit in to your mana. Like, you can play Chandra and hold up shock, or, you know, crack a clue and then play a 2-drop. Whereas if you use all of your mana in segmented pieces first, then your big mana thing is going to take up a full turn, and that's kind of a hassle. Also, every turn that Avacyn is in play is 4 damage, which is a multiple. His life total is multiples of that. So I think it's better to just play it for mana efficiency's sake. But we see a sort of weird level 3 going on here that I think Carvalho missed. So, here. Avacyn hit for 4. And Marcio goes to shock his Inspector, to flip the Avacyn, to take out the tracker while it's still X3. Also deals with the Refiner. Obviously, you're fine getting rid of your Inspectors. And Avacyn gains 2 power. Seems like a great exchange for Carvalho. The only problem is this is embarrassing. So I think what happened here is Marcio didn't realize that okay. Marcio thought that this Avacyn resolving and getting a hit in, hitting Lucas from 16 to 12, indicated that he didn't have Harness Lightning. Or that it was, you know, far less likely that he had Harness Lightning, which is the only way to deal with this Avacyn play, which means that this shock line that's hugely profitable can't be broken up. The problem with that is that Marcio should know that this negate exists, right? The not cracking of the clue last turn puts this negate face up on the table, as I said to camera. So now that you know about negate being held up, this attack, of course he's going to take the damage. He wants to hold negate up. So this attack getting through no longer means that he doesn't have Harness Lightning. It just confirms that he does have Negate. And I think Marcio missed that. Tap out for Chandra. Negate it. Untap, and in response to the flip trigger, Harness Lightning. And it's a bloodbath. It's an absolute bloodbath. Still no land is a little unfortunate. Drawing a card off of Saheeli with the Refiner. Sick value. But still bricks on a land. And the struggle now is for red mana, because being able to do multiple things in a turn is going to be kind of important as this game goes forward. You know, you have the removal for the creature lands. You have your ground crew for any ground creatures. You have 2 release the gremlins, not even 1 but 2 for the heart. Or the Chandra for anything that comes around. Saheeli to win the game maybe at some point. Everything is pretty much boxed out as long as you can deploy it all in time. Which the bottleneck is the red mana. Except for Attune the Aether! The truth is, the bottleneck was potentially red mana, but there wasn't enough pressure. Like, even if Attune didn't come off the top there, release the Gremlins for 2 on the Heart of Kirin and Scrounger there is going to be lights out either way. You still have your Harness Lightnings. You still have another release in case Boat comes off the top. You have just everything boxed out as Lucas. The red mana just makes it so that it's not even a question of, you know, can I do it in time? If they draw enough perfects in a row, will I get run over just before I can do it? No, you're going to have time either way, but Attune just says, don't even worry about it, bro. I got you. I got you. Yeah, Release the Gremlins is, like I said up top, it's, you know, split card, kill their best card and stabilize the board, or for 3 mana, or 5 mana win the game. It sure feels like it. Especially if they're on boats instead of Avacyn's, which I think is a new evolution. I think the boats have to just become Avacyn's 3 and 4. Because again, flying is so good, but the artifacts are so bad against Negate and Release the Gremlins. Just play all your Avacyn's. You know, you can still do this going bigger plan without having to go full control with Fumigates and all that stuff that's really bad. You don't have to do the Oath of Liliana Raptor transformation. You can do Marcio's sort of semi-transformation, his going bigger, by just doing it with all Avacyn's. Forget the boats. Forget the boats, we got planes. You know? It's 2017. Go to the skies. Lucas just playing with his food at this point. You know, it's super huge match, so of course he's going to make sure that he's doing everything right. But he's 99.9% to win as of last turn. Or as of the Avacyn blowout turn, I guess. The Avacyn blowout turn, he went to like 95%, and then drawing Attune put him to 99.9%. Harness Lightning Thalia, because why not? You have Negate, you have Harness Lightning, you have Release, and you even have Saheeli to win if that's so how you want to do it. Tracker's rolling. It's just over. Release some more gremlins, because why not? LOL. And that is. And so, make sure I got the right scene. And so, Lucas Blohon advanced to the finals, where he was defeated. But that match is also really, really good, and I highly recommend you check it out. But we've already spent almost 2 hours, an hour and a half, going over these games. I normally do a Q&A at the end of this, but the chat seems kind of dead, first of all. And secondly, I answered a bunch of questions throughout, and I'm going to be doing a bunch of other stuff, streaming and whatnot. So you can ask me then. Yeah. If you're watching this on YouTube later, make sure you follow on Twitch, which is where we recorded this live. And you can follow on Twitter, and I tweet whenever anything happens, and I do anything. But I do these sort of Magic-y shows every Wednesday. Today is Friday, so oops. But Wednesday was International Women's Day, so happy International Women's Day, women. I guess that's all I got. I'm a little behind on videos, so this will be going up on YouTube, but I have the podcast that I recorded with Charles Gindy, and what's the other video? Oh, the ranting video about bannings and whatnot. I have to edit both of those videos. Unlike this one that's just raw, just going straight out to YouTube, those require editing. And I'm backed up on editing because my editing software exploded and I lost a lot of work. So I got to start from scratch on those. But those will be up soon. Could have put my face cam over Pisoli and Reed. I thought about it. Or just putting like the new putting these logos over their faces. But it was, whoops. It was just a little too disrespectful, you know. Got too much respect for those guys to not show their pretty faces. And their commentary was very good. Again, if you didn't watch the MOCS, the play was amazing, and the commentary was amazing, and the formats were mediocre. But seriously, go check them out. And thank you all for watching, and goodbye. Good night, everybody. Good night, good night, good night.